Angela Merkel is no more. She has bestrode European politics for 16 years. Take that, Margaret Thatcher. And her party has had an almost automatic right to rule for all of that time. It may well lose office, if not power, this evening, though the baffling traffic light coalitions that are being discussed may mean that they stay in there in a coalition government. The big winners appear to be the Social Democrats. Once on the floor at around 10%, 11% in the public opinion polls, they appear to have scored 25%, which is pitiful if you think of it, but might actually give them the chancellorship. Or will it have to go to the so-called Greens? Although they're anybody's, they might actually go into coalition with the right wing as with the centre-left. They might be left at the post altogether in a grand national coalition. They're still counting in the elections there. We'll bring you up to date if any more news emerges. But the fate of German politics is of very great importance to all the people of Europe, including the people of Britain. The direction of the European Union is at stake also, not least because President Macron faces a very difficult re-election in France in the next few months. But if the Social Democrats in Germany have done better than expected, the Social Democrats in Britain have had a disastrous conference so far. Their wooden leader, Keir Starmer, robotic and almost an artificial intelligence on the British political scene, has presided over a fiasco this weekend. First, he said that he wanted to change the rules for the election of leader of the party, scrap the system that gave him the leadership in order to make it effectively impossible for anyone to the left of him ever to be leader again. Part of an ongoing purge, scourge. The scourging of Labour is what is going on now. Cue panic amongst putative leaders after him, because most observers agree. Even desperate Dan Hodges today wrote Keir Starmer off and said it was time for him to go. Putative challengers like Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, and like Angela Rayner, one Angela goes, another one thinks that her hour has come. As the deputy leader of the Labour Party, she issued forth a blood-curdling description of the majority of the British people. She called them Tories, but she was really speaking to their voters when she described them as racist, misogynistic scum. Now, she said it was kind of just northern banter, but that is, of course, not how it's been taken, not least by her own leader, who's promised to have a word with her. But this is all virtue signalling to the Labour members. Vote for me, says Angela. I'm a real class fighter. I'm so poor, my mother used to serve me dog food because she couldn't read the labels. Gave me jelly and shaving cream because she couldn't read the labels. I'm so poor, says Angela, I would have been taken into care in today's world, except that wouldn't have happened because there's not enough social workers to check up on children in vulnerable households like she once was. Pregnant at 15 while still at school. All of these are signals for Angela Rayner's forthcoming Labour leadership campaign challenge. But it's all the narcissism of the small difference. What Freud called the magnification of small differences to make people imagine that a real choice, a real dichotomy is in play here. The truth is, you couldn't slip sixpence between the two cheeks of the same backside in British politics. And the same is true, essentially, in the United States of America between the Republicans and the Democrats. Therefore, they have to magnify, they have to megaphone such small differences as exist to fool the public. That's the truth of the matter. I'm more northern than Angela Rayner. I'm just as working class as Angela Rayner. And I don't go around calling my political opponents scum, not least because I'm trying to win their voters over to my point of view. And calling someone a misogynistic, racist piece of scum is probably the least likely way of achieving that. Indeed, Labour has been on that course as a whole, left and right, for so many decades now. It might very well be true that the next Labour Prime Minister is yet to be born. I don't call my political opponents scum because, well, I think it's dangerous. It's the language of civil war. After all, if someone is a misogynistic, racist piece of scum, then why are we sharing the same air with them in debates and arguments? Why are we sitting in Parliament with them? Why aren't we organising a revolution to overthrow them? You see where this all leads? But I'll tell Angela what a better description of scum would be. Picture a politician who was a complete nobody, utterly obscure. No one had ever heard of them. And a leader comes to power and gives them a place in the sun, puts them on the front bench, promotes them, gives them titles, shares platforms with them. And then that politician stabs his or her patron in the back multiple times. That politician has secret dinners with, say, someone called Lord Cashpoint, a supporter of everything that politician pretended to oppose. Lord Cashpoint was the benefactor of, and indeed the financial organizer of, the very Tony Blair that the young politician purported to despise. And at those secret dinners, a plot was hatched, which came to fruition, and which led to the overthrow of that politician's former patron, led to his expulsion from the Labour Party, and led to the complete rout of everyone associated with them, including that politician's own flatmate, a former member of the front bench, just like him or her. A betrayer, an apostate, a backstabber, a liar and a deceiver. Angela, that's what would be scum. Enough of these pretenders, imposters. Why do I even care? Well, I care because every country needs an opposition, and Labour sure ain't anybody's idea of an opposition. Perhaps we'll come back to that later. Perhaps in the context of the poll that we're running. Who will be the next Labour Prime Minister? Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham, or C. Not born yet? You can vote on my Twitter feed, on my Telegram, on my YouTube channel right now on that. I want to turn to more globally significant matters. Stephen Donziger has been under house arrest for 3 whole years. If you're a regular viewer and listener, you already know that because we have regularly featured him on the show. To call him a martyr to corporate power would be to understate it. Chevron have basically bought their own court, their own judges, their own bailiffs, and have managed to keep a man who's not even charged by the criminal justice system locked up in his own house for 3 whole years, unable to live a normal life, unable to work, entirely dependent on the goodwill of those who have supported his case, including our first guest, the one and only legendary Roger Waters. He's up in court this week, Stephen Donziger. What is this private court going to do next? 3 years of house arrest? What's next? Devil's Island? The guillotine? All without a single by your leave from the Attorney General of the United States or any legitimate public justice system court. It's going to be important, that court case, because it's going to delineate the boundaries of corporate power and private justice in the United States of America. It's an important case. But important as it is, it's not as important as the epic piece of journalism published today by Yahoo News. Not the Communist Workers' Party Daily, not the Russian media, but by Yahoo News. A 3-header written after a great deal of research and interviews with more than 30 US intelligence officials, as well as politicians, White House staffers, and politicians in and around the administration of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It is an epic piece of work. And it reveals, I say reveals, but again, regular viewers and listeners already know that Julian Assange, the truth teller, the publisher, the journalist, has been subjected to the most remorseless campaign of persecution ever known since the invention of the printing press, since men and women began to communicate with each other in writing. All because he told the truth, the uncomfortable truths that the powerful never wanted you to know. Julian Assange has been subjected to set up, frame up, false accusations, incarceration, cruel torture, kidnap, rendition, 2 years in Belmarsh, maximum security jail, facing extradition, facing a 145-year prison sentence in the internal Guantanamo in Colorado. He's been spied upon. He's been betrayed. He's been sold by the former president of Ecuador. But what we didn't know, in the detail we now know, thanks to this piece in Yahoo, is that at the very highest levels of the American government, serious discussions took place about whether or not it would be legal, and if legal, practicable, to murder him in London, in the Ecuador embassy, at the highest level, in the presence of the President of the United States. Discussions driven by the former Secretary of State, Fat Mikey Pompeo, in his capacity as head of the CIA and as Secretary of State of the United States of America. Whether to murder a journalist in London, in an embassy, whether it would be legal, and if legal, practicable. Go away, don't censor yourselves, said Pompeo. Give me the options of how we could murder a journalist in London. in an embassy, the sovereign territory of a third country. If not murder him, then kidnap him. Illegally, extraordinarily rendition him through a black prison where we could rid ourselves of this turbulent priest. These discussions took place over years. The building was bugged. My conversations with Assange were bugged. Pamela Anderson having a pee in the toilet of the embassy was bugged. Every move that Julian Assange made was illegally bugged and watched in real time by American intelligence officials. It's all in the article. Julian's children's nappies were stolen so they could get the DNA and establish his fatherhood of those children. You feel me? This was all happening. Now, if you were one of these liberals, progressives, leftists, who lent yourself to this remorseless persecution, murder plots, kidnap plots, illegal spying of Julian Assange, hang your head now in shame. If you were one of those people that followed me around with placards, Julian Assange is a rapist, hang your heads now in shame. History has already absolved Julian Assange and those like me that love him and supported him. We're already absolved, but for you, the chickens are coming home to roost. The article reveals that the Americans and the British were agreed upon a shootout on the streets of London if the Russians managed to get Julian into a diplomatic car and drive him to an airfield to fly him to Russia. Now, I don't know if Russia ever had such a plan. If they did, hats off to them. God bless you, Squire. Well done, the Kremlin, if they did. I don't know if, as the report states, Julian turned down such an escape plan. If he did, he was foolish to do so. If he'd asked me, I would have told him to go ahead with it. But if it had happened, American and British officials openly, well, not openly, openly amongst themselves, discussed a gun battle on the streets of London, the shooting of the tires of a Russian embassy motor car, the shooting of the tires of a Russian aeroplane if he managed to get to the airfield, the hovering of a helicopter over the aircraft to make sure it couldn't take off. This was all discussed for years at the highest levels of the British and American governments. And guess who was one of the participants in the discussions? None other than Her Majesty's Leader of the Opposition, then the Director of Public Prosecutions, Sir Keir Starmer, QC. And some fools wonder why I despise him.